What's up, everyone? I hope you're doing well. Today is late night edition of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast, but still had to get one up today. It's interesting. I was having a thought to myself about existing in spaces where I am welcomed, where my voice is welcomed, and professional wrestling is one of them. And I wasn't going to tape a show today, to be honest. I wasn't in the mood to do one, but I see the same voices are talking about the same topics, and I have to make sure that I continue to do the work to carve out a space for my voice and others that may potentially look like me. So with that in mind, I had to get a show up today, and thankfully, there's plenty to talk about in the world of professional wrestling. This is Raphael Garcia, and I'm here for episode number 96 of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. I want to thank you again for taking the time to check out this show when you had the opportunity. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this content. You can catch us on our YouTube channel where you found this episode over at MMA Ratings. And you can hit us up on Spotify as well in the same space, Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Overcast as well. You can check us out at MMA Ratings Net on Instagram and Twitter. Myself, you can hit me up at rgarcia_sports. You can always find me there on both Instagram and Twitter. So again, as always, thank you for your support for checking out our show. Today I'll be talking about All Out, which is this Sunday. I'll be doing a preview of that, talking about my trip to go see that showcase, hitting up some WWE news, talking about Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair, Brock Lesnar, all of that fallout from SummerSlam and NXT TakeOver from last week, and diving into some things I want to see going forward in both WWE and AEW. And also hitting upon NWA Empower from from last night. So there was a lot of things going on in professional wrestling. So again, I want to thank you all for taking the time to check out this show, for listening to my content, and giving me a space in this conversation. So let's go ahead and jump into the preview of All Out. So AEW All Out is scheduled for this Sunday in the Hoffman Estates Arena in Now Arena in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, near Chicago, basically what it's being called, and I will be there in attendance. And there's a lot to really talk about. I'm going to talk about this event poster as well too. We'll hit up that in a moment. But let's jump into this show where we have 10 matches across the event, and AEW has to. It's tough because they do these really long shows. There's at least 4 matches that don't need to be on this show, but they still do these really long events. They only do, I think it's 4 or 5 pay-per-views a year, so it's understandable that they stack them in so many events. But there's at least 3 matches that don't need to be on this show. Paul White versus QT Marshall, no reason why it should be on this show, especially why it should be on the pay-per-view. Chris Jericho versus MJF, I don't need to see this show on the pay-per-view either. John Moxley versus Satoshi Kojima, that's going to be a hard-hitting match. It's going to be fun, but again, that doesn't really need to be on this pay-per-view as well. You can even say that Pock and Andrade doesn't necessarily need to be on this show, but they have them all here. I mean, the women, they have a 21-woman casino battle royal with the winner getting a future shot at the AEW women's title, and that is on the pre-show. And a lot of people are pretty upset about that. The thought is that people will see the pre-show, get interested in the content, and then buy the pay-per-view, and I understand that. But it also goes to say that when the men have a similar event that's on the pay-per-view. So I understand why people are both not concerned, but people aren't surprised looking at how AEW has booked their women's division in the past. But this still is just another moment where it's like, you guys had the opportunity to really do better here with this, and you decided not to. This is a decision. But with NWA Empower from this past weekend, you see that there's a draw when it comes to women's wrestling. People have put their eyeballs on the content, especially when it's good content around women's wrestling. So AEW still has some work to do in this space, but this women's battle royal should be very, very good. The announced names are Nyla Rose, Thunder Rosa, The Bunny, Big Swole, Julia Hart, Tay Conti, Diamante, Penelope Ford, Red Velvet. And there's 12 women who have not been announced. The 12 individuals I expect to see in this event, I'm not going to name all 12, but there's a couple that kind of really already pop out to mind. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the likes of Camille. She's the current NWA Women's Champion. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Deonna Purrazzo. Lady Frost. I wouldn't be surprised if she's in there. Allison Kay. I won't be surprised if she's in that. Ruby Soho, especially with a lot of the promo videos that she's doing. And there was the rumor from a couple weeks ago that she's basically heading towards AEW. There's a lot of opportunity here for them to create some solid buzz around their women's division. They haven't, I understand why Jade Cargill's not in it. She shouldn't be in it right now. She's still too green. But I think that they're going to really set some buzz forward for their women's division with this. Even I think the women are really going to show out here. They consistently do. So I'm looking forward to this women's battle royal. Who do I think is going to win? Right now, I'm going to put my money on either Thunder Rosa or Big Swole. Britt Baker needs a bigger feud. She has Chris Statlander at All Out, but that doesn't feel big at all. Rosa and Swole both have wins over her, which in my opinion should be getting talked about more, but they're not for reasons that will go unnamed. We can have a whole show on that by itself, but I'm expecting Rosa or Big Swole to get the victory here. Probably Rosa, just because she's super over wherever she goes. Let's talk about the next match here, and this is just running it down based off of the listing they have over here on Wikipedia. I'm not really looking at what, in my opinion, I think CM Punk versus Darby Allen is going to be the main event, but let's just run down what they have here listed on Wikipedia. They have Kenny Omega versus Christian Cage. Omega's going to win this match, clearly. I think it'll be good. It'll be better than what they did over at Rampage. Rampage was a good match as well too. They're gonna probably do some of the similar stuff, but iterate upon it as they should. I'm expecting Omega to get the win here, and that's why it made it. A lot of people talked about why the victory happened 2 weeks ago with Cage taking the Impact title off of Omega. It makes sense for Impact, but it doesn't make sense for this storyline, because now we know Cage isn't taking that AEW title off of Omega's waist. And they don't do a lot of the whole rematch game like WWE does. But this one, it makes a little bit of sense, because obviously you have to give Omega something to do at All Out. And Adam Page is gone because he's going away for maternity leave, right? No, paternity leave, excuse me. And then you can't necessarily outshine CM Punk. You can't throw CM Punk right into that title feud either. So they have to give him something a little bit different to do, which is where Christian Cage comes into play. Cage has been good since he's been back. He's been performing well, and he is he could put together a solid match with him and Omega. We've already seen that. I expect this to be good, but I'm expecting Omega to pick up a clear win here. Then we have the match that I'm looking forward to seeing the most. Pock versus Andrade. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start with this. I'm expecting Andrade to win just because he's still being presented as the bigger star between the two. However, he's being presented in that fashion, but he doesn't come off to me in that fashion still right now in AEW. Something is amiss, and I'm not quite sure what it is. Ricky Guerrero wasn't doing it. Chavo Guerrero isn't really doing it. I'm not really sure what's missing from him. It's interesting because a lot of people, when he was in WWE, a lot of people immediately pointed to the fact that he doesn't speak English fluently as a reason that was holding him back. And you wonder if that's still a thing, because even with Chavo and Vicky by his side, he still doesn't have that big star feel. Malachi Black came into AEW and immediately eclipsed him. Why is that? Is part of that because he doesn't speak English? You could say that if you want to be lazy and point to that, but Malachi hasn't really been talking too much, so that really kind of takes the hump out of it. when you look at their matches, compare them up one-on-one, he competed against Cody. He's had a match against Brock Anderson, killing him. Andrade, he had the match against Matt Sydal, but I don't really know what else he's done beyond that. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I want to pull that up and look. Let's see. So in AEW, since his debut, he had a match with Matt Sydal, and that's the only AEW match he had. He had that AAA title against Kenny Omega where he lost that, and then he also lost to Alberto El Patron. So yeah, it's just weird. It's weird. Like he just doesn't feel like the type of star that everybody thought he would be coming into AEW, and that's really hurt him. This match is going to slap. Like I said, this is the one I'm looking forward to the most. I expect Andrade to get the victory, but I just don't think that he really feels like the star that we all expected him to feel at this point. Then you have Paul White versus QT Marshall. Again, like I said, this shouldn't be on the pay-per-view. Get this off of my television. Fans are going to pop for Paul White, of course, but no, I'm not here for it. The Young Bucks versus the Lucha Brothers in a cage match for the AEW Tag Team titles. I'm surprised that the Lucha Brothers are back in this match. I thought that Jurassic Express, I almost said Jurassic Park. I expected them to get into this matchup because the point of the steel cage is to keep other people out from interfering. All the Young Bucks matches have all the shenanigans in the world with all of the elite jumping in, Brandon Cutler, the Good Brothers, etc., etc. So you would think that a cage would be meant for the feud with the Jurassic Express, but Lucha Brothers picked up the win on Rampage there in this match. So it's going to be a spot fest, and people are going to pop for it left and right. That is what happens anytime the Lucha Brothers and the Young Bucks get to the ring together. They'll do some things we've seen before. They'll do a lot of things we haven't seen before. And fans are going to cheer. They're going to chant, "This is awesome, fight forever," etc., etc. But I'm a little bit over this. I think the Young Bucks are going to win clearly again here because, again, just like with Andrade, the Lucha Brothers don't feel like stars. And they could be. I mean, you have Penta and you have Rey Fenix. They could be bigger names in AEW than they feel like. Like, they could feel almost like a mirror if they were booked in a similar fashion, or if they were booked in a way that made them push them over the hump in that fashion. They don't feel like. They feel like henchmen that are bouncing between Pock and Andrade, even though that hasn't really happened quite yet. So I expect this match to be fun. I do. But, again, it's not for me, and I don't think I don't think that's really going to really play out. Then we have Chris Jericho versus MJF. I'm not talking about that. CM Punk versus Darby Allen. I think this is going to be the main event. There's a lot of back and forth about whether or not Punk should go over, and people are talking about how if that hurts Darby Allen's stature, etc., etc. This is nothing like Bill Goldberg going over the Fiend. This is nothing like WWE pulling out their old toys and putting them over younger talent, or Bill Goldberg going over Kevin Owens, etc., etc. This is nothing like that. CM Punk is coming back full time, and you see the impact he's had for AEW. I mean, he's pushed their platform to bigger numbers and bigger, more eyeballs than previously expected. I mean, I work for an outlet in fan-sided MMA that only was interested in covering WWE, but they made it a point to cover anything CM Punk in AEW last week and when he came back. So that should tell you just how important his return is. So Darby Allin can take a pin here. It's fine. He can lose this match. I'm wondering if this is going to lead to something of a more of a heelish turn from Darby, which I would be behind. But Punk goes over here and he goes over big. And I'm also expecting this to be the main event of the evening. I don't think anything else should main event just because of who was in this match. I'm so looking forward to hearing his music hit. I'm so looking forward to seeing him yell out his clobbering time and just seeing how he can go. You know, you see a lot and you read a lot of these reports about him looking good in the ring so far. So I'm hoping that he continues to deliver on that, and I'm hoping that he performs well. So there's also talk about, obviously, Daniel Bryan coming back. He was hinted at in Pock's promo this past weekend on Dynamite. He's being brought up left and right. Tony Khan said he expects to have some other surprises at All Out. So, I mean, let's see what happens. Like, let's get crazy out there. That would be a big, big moment. And to see these two, if those are the last two guys that are in the ring before things close out, it'll be a great show regardless of what else happens. Britt Baker versus Chris Statlander. Obviously, she's going to have Jamie Hayter in her corner. I'm expecting Britt Baker to go over. They're not taking that title off of her anytime soon. So this is going to be, standard. This should be a solid match here. But I'm expecting Chris Statlander to lose here. Jamie Hayter will probably play a part in that, and I'm thinking Hayter and her will continue that feud on elsewhere, probably on Dark. But Britt Baker gets a clean win here. They only have one women's match on the entire pay-per-view. So there's 9 matches on the pay-per-view, and one of them is a women's match. That's what they're booked right now. WWE doesn't have the greatest storylines, but they book multiple women's matches. I mean, SummerSlam had 3, right? 3, or was it 4? No, it was 3. So let's see. I mean, that's a space where AEW can catch WWE if they do some things differently, but they just haven't invested that space into their women's division right now. So hopefully they do something to improve upon that. Then we have Jon Moxley versus Kojima. Again, this is going to be a fun one, but it's just a way to get Moxley on a card. This is a match that they could have done without. This could be on Dynamite. This could be on Rampage. It could be anywhere else. It doesn't need to be on a pay-per-view that's going to be, 5 hours long or however ridiculously long it's going to be. So, Moxley goes over. It is what it is. Miro versus Eddie Kingston. And I'm going to say something I wasn't expecting myself to say tonight. Miro is probably the best thing running on AEW right now. Period. His character is amazing. At some point in time, they're going to have to figure out a way to get him into the main event scene. And when you get him there, he has to be champion. There's no one that can beat him right now. And if they do beat him, it has to be the entire elite jumping in. Because what AEW does is when they beat someone in a title picture, they usually get sent right back to, Dark or Dino or whatever. They get sent backwards for the most part, for some people. You can't do that with Miro because he's getting over, fans are loving him, and the dude is working his ass off right now. So he has to have some type of big moment. I expect him to absolutely destroy Eddie Kingston. Kingston's going to be talking his shit. He's going to get smashed, and I'm looking forward to that. Not in a way because I'm not an Eddie Kingston fan. Who's not? But more because this is going to be a big moment for Miro. All those conversations about him not being used right or utilized correctly, all that's in the past. Like, that is the way he was initially booked when he came into AEW versus the way he's booked now is almost like this night and day. Totally different. So I'm looking forward to this match. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for him because eventually he's going to lose that TNT title. Eventually he's going to get into the main event picture, and that's going to be absolutely bonkers. So let's keep on rolling. Oh, yes. Jake Paul won via split decision. So, yeah, there's that. I'm not going to talk. Schwan and I will talk more about that during the MMA Ratings podcast later on this week. Those are all the matches for All Out that I'm really interested in breaking down and previewing tonight. I'm looking forward to really going to the event. This will be my first in-person wrestling event since 2019. I was thinking the other day, what was the last one that I went to, and I can't even really remember. I believe it was a Monday Night Raw after, it had to be, no, maybe it was an early Monday Night Raw in 2020 was the last one I went to. I had to look to my phone and kind of look at the videos and stuff like that, but it's been a minute since I've been to one, so I'm looking forward to going to this. I do expect to do a post show, potentially, in my room in the Airbnb that I got, because who books themselves a 5 a.m. flight out of Chicago? Me. So probably not even gonna go to sleep. We're gonna see how that pans out. That should be fun. But I'm looking forward to going to the event and just being there. I do expect to meet some people who you've seen me interact with across social media. So that should be fun as well. Phil Lindsay, have talked about linking up this past weekend. I may get some jiu-jitsu in with Elias and the rest of the crew on Sunday. We got to talk about that as well too. But I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. It'll be my second time flying since COVID, so let's have some fun with that, right? And All Out's going to be a big moment for AEW, and I'm looking forward to what happens after this, because now we are in a situation where people are starting to want more from AEW. We got our CM Punk return. A huge moment. They're 2 years old now. They've been in the game for about 2 years now. Coming up on, I think October was their first show in 2019. So people are wanting to see more, and even the poster for All Out really shows you something, because on this poster they have one woman, Britt Baker, they have one black person, Mark Henry, they have Andrade is the only Latino, you have Miro on it, he's not a person of color, he's a person of color, you have Miro on it as well too. Everybody else, white men. And you see people and some people aren't having the best good faith conversations around diversity and inclusion in AEW, because they're just trying to troll, because it is what it is. That's what some people do online, but it's starting to become an issue, clearly. Diversity and inclusion is possible in professional wrestling. NXT, I just realized this past week, they have 5 or 6, they have multiple belts. All of the belts are held by people of color except the $1 Million Championship, which is held by Cameron Grimes. You have Zoe Stark and Io Shirai as women's tag team champions. You have Raquel Gonzalez as the women's champion. Kushida as NXT Cruiserweight champion. You have Swerve as the North American champion. MSK, now one half of MSK is white, so you have MSK and West. One half of them are white as tag team champions. Then you have Samoa Joe, who's Samoan, clearly, as the NXT champion. Diversity and inclusion is possible in professional wrestling. AEW is not at that point yet. They talk a lot about it, but they're not at that point to really point to their roster and say, we are an inclusive roster. Are they diverse? Sure. They have a number of black women, brown women, black men and brown men left and right on that roster. They have a number of women who or individuals who identify in various areas of the spectrum. But how are they being utilized? Do we see them on TV? Do we see them consistently on television? We see them on Dark. We see them on YouTube all the time. But do we see them in AEW's brightest moments when most eyeballs are on their content? The answer is no right now. And I often joke about it, but looking at AEW's crowds, man, they're white men. And it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like on this weekend, because a lot of people say that AEW crowds are vastly different from WWE crowds. I'm really looking forward to that, because when I went to their first show in DC, I was sitting in a booth, so I didn't get to see. I wasn't in the crowd. So let's see what this really looks like come this weekend. But I do want to see more when it comes to diversity and inclusion from AEW, and I would like to see it sooner rather than later. They're coming up on 2 years in, and I do believe that they could be doing better than what we see right now. So, all right, let's keep the show rolling. I'm going to turn my focus over to WWE and talk about the fallout from SummerSlam and NXT TakeOver. I'm just going to go ahead and start with TakeOver because I had that listed down further down in the card. The only thing from TakeOver I wanted to talk about was giving my props to Walter and Ilya Dragunov. That match on Sunday from last week, if you are doing your match of the year list for 2021 and Walter versus Dragunov 2 is not on that list, you should be ashamed of yourself. And your vote should be nullified immediately. That match was the best WWE match I've seen in the last few years. And their first one was exceptional as well, too. And they completely blew that out the water. I was originally on the vote of Johnny Gargano versus Kushida from back in February. I think it was February. Was going to be the best match you see in WWE this year. And they almost made it the whole year. This match, it outdid them. Everything about this match worked for me. Even the finish. I know a couple people are mad at the idea of Walter tapping. I looked at that more as if Walter was broken. That no matter the amount of damage and pain he put on Dragunov, he would not go away. And that is what broke him. He's never been faced with something like that. I'm wondering what they're going to do with them next. Dragunov is going to be on NXT this week, but after the show, this show's taped this week. After that, I'm guessing he's going back to NXT TakeOver or NXT UK. But no one watches that. Let's keep him where we can see him, where we can engage with him, and where he can be a bigger name. But again, with all these changes coming to NXT, you don't really know what's going to happen. But I just wanted to give that match props because, man, they really stole the show. We had two big returns this past weekend, Brock Lesnar and Becky Lynch. I'm going to talk about Brock Lesnar first because he came back and stared down Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns. I think that's going to be an interesting storyline when it plays out because already Brock Lesnar wasn't on SmackDown this week. And he wasn't there. He wasn't there, and that's the I do not want to see Brock Lesnar in the main event storyline if he's not going to be present. That's just not. It makes me not want to watch SmackDown if the show after the big angle where him and Reigns face off, he's just not there. That doesn't do it for me. This iteration of Roman facing Lesnar is an interesting storyline, and it should draw eyeballs. They had a big number. They popped a big number on Saturday or Sunday, Friday. Again, it's Friday, mostly because Becky Lynch's return there, but Brock Lesnar was not around. Wrestling fans don't want someone to be in the main event picture if they're not going to be there. This part-time bullshit ain't for. It's not for us anymore. So I'm not sure how it's going to work out long term, but there's something here that fans will want to see, and I think that will be exciting for people to watch. Right now, Finn is working Roman, which should definitely work. It should definitely keep rolling. I'm interested in that. I don't expect Finn to win there, but I think it's something that it's a suitable option, and it keeps Roman defending his title on television, which I think is important because that title needs to be on TV, the champion needs to be on TV, and it gives you something to compete for there. There was a lot of news coming out of Brock Lesnar's return about how he was basically rushed to return because of the CM Punk return. WWE wanted to have something big for themselves over the weekend as well. So clearly there's no forward planning. They probably have no idea when he's going to be back and what the next steps are for him after that moment. But, that's what WWE does. They fly by the fucking seat of their pants and they let shit roll. And speaking of flying by the seat of their pants, Becky Lynch's return. So Sasha Banks was unable to compete at SummerSlam, and WWE knew for at least 8 days in advance. But they continued to advertise her being there. all the way up until Bianca Belair walks out to the ring. Then they go. Everyone's heard. If you're listening to this show, you've heard the story by now. What they did. Carmella comes out. Becky Lynch comes out. Becky Lynch destroys Carmella, and then she beats Bianca Belair in 26 seconds. I have concerns about this. Now, people are going to be interested in Becky Lynch, as you saw from the ratings numbers on Friday. She helped drive that show to a big number. I think it's the biggest number since January of this year, which is important and must be recognized. You can also be a Becky Lynch fan, and you can be a Bianca Belair fan at the same time. My concern is I do not trust WWE in building Bianca Belair back up in a compelling fashion that makes me believe she is on the level of Becky, thus the other 4 horsewomen. They've never done that. They've never done that with any other woman in the WWE since the women's evolution started. Asuka still has not gotten out from under the shadow of the other 4 horsewomen. Period. She has not. Especially Charlotte. Rhea Ripley is never getting out from under Charlotte's shadow. Nikki Ash, look what happened to her. She got pinned, or she lost the title. She won the title, got pinned a couple times. Obviously got beat by Charlotte. Then she drops the title at SummerSlam, and they immediately move on from her and go to Alexa Bliss. I'm going to flat out sit here and tell you that this has me concerned about Bianca Belair. Yes, she's back in the title picture. She won that contenders match on Friday, and she'll be facing off against Lynch probably at Extreme Rules. No problem. I do not see any situation where she goes over her. Period. And then what happens? She's going to continue to get rematch after rematch and lose everyone like Carmella did? What about Sasha Banks? How is her health going? She's not going to go over Becky as well. To be honest, I think we're headed back to a situation where we have Becky 2 belts once again. Because if WWE had their way, they'd run nothing but Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch. Period. They'd run nothing else. So let's see what happens here. Because I have a lot of concerns. The perceptions of this situation do not look good for Bianca Belair. And, the long-term impact there. I'm reading a lot about she took it in stride and she was very professional about that. Of course, she's going to be. We have to work twice as hard to get just as far. She knows that. She's seen her opportunities in WWE, like going back to NXT and all of the other situations. So let's see what happens. People are excited about Bianca Belair. Black fans love her. Women's wrestling fans love her. So hopefully WWE does more to protect her than what they did last weekend. Because to be honest, we all can't take too much more of that. I'm going to just spend a couple seconds talking about the changes coming to NXT. So NXT has been... This sucks because for me, NXT has been a good show. And I've enjoyed everything about NXT. I mean, just about everything. I understand that a lot of people are down on it, and I get that. To me, it's still the best aspect of WWE's product on television. That doesn't necessarily always say a lot, but it is still the best product there for me. But changes are coming. I'm sure everyone already saw the new logo that's being dropped, and I didn't like it. It looked kind of like a middle schooler's art project. It really made me think of some old white man in a marketing room somewhere thinking like, this is what the millennial will like. Something that looks like this. It just doesn't look good to me. They're looking to no longer bring in a lot of indie talent as they have in the past. Instead, looking for people that fit the look of what a WWE superstar looks like. Notice didn't say wrestler, WWE superstar, and kind of molding them into a person that fits their brand, which is understandable. You see that a lot across any brands. Like, you want people to work within your mold. I get that. And I don't think we should be totally upset about that, because if you look at people, if this means we'll be getting more of individuals like Odyssey Jones and Carmelo Hayes, okay, maybe we have something to look forward there to. I mean, you see more women getting some shine on AEW television. You see Gigi Dolan, who is the former Priscilla Kelly. You see JC Jane. She also had an independent run. I can't remember her name. Somebody told me the other day. But you see some individuals kind of bubbling up. So maybe there's opportunity there. But I and everyone else that has talked about this has concern. And I get it. I understand. We'll see what this show looks like. I mean, they taped a couple of episodes, I think, through next week. So after that, we'll really be looking and seeing what this product will look like. But we should all be concerned. We should be concerned. Let's see what this really looks like. Change isn't always the worst thing. Sometimes it can envelope into something good. But not with WWE sometimes. Like, they just give me goosebumps thinking about them wanting to touch anything that I like, period. I wanted to also talk about NWA Empower, which was what's today? It was Saturday. And this was a big moment for women's wrestling. As you know, Mickie James, when she was released, she's consistently pushed for equality in professional wrestling, even in WWE, and it probably played a part in her being released. So she was released from the WWE, and she made it a commitment that she was going to get an all-women show done, and she was able to do so through NWA Power. And this show was a success. It had some good matches across the board. And people the people who attended and the people who watched really enjoyed the content. That's the whole point. Women's wrestling isn't a prop. It is it can be a successful draw if booked right. And the potential impact of this event should be interesting across wrestling, because it shows, like, hey, AEW, do a better job at the women's division. You have a lot of talent that were on Empower who are in your brand looking to get shine. WWE, the women on your roster saw this, and if you're not booking those individuals well, does that mean that they're going to stick around? You never know. The impact of this show should be felt wide, and I think it's huge. You know, you got to give props to Mickie James for being able to pull this off. Again, she is GOAT Hall of Fame status, period. She was that before, and she's even bigger now with this show being done and it coming off so well. So you have to take a moment to tip your hat to what we saw there across the board. I mean, Deonna Purrazzo, Camille, Layla Hirsch, Marty Bell, Allison Kay, Melina, Deonna Purrazzo, I think I already said her name, but so many other women, and they didn't have Tessa Blanchard included, which is even better. Because I know everybody wants to bring her back, but she still hasn't shown any remorse. But I mean, she'll be back eventually. Let's see what it looks like. I mean, I don't know if anybody, AEW will probably take that shine and bring her back and kind of deal with that heat, but she wasn't on Empower, so I'm totally okay with that. This was a great show. If you have the opportunity, if you didn't see it live, go back and watch it. I'm sure you can find the content somewhere. But with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and close out this edition of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. This is episode number 96. My name is Raphael Garcia, and as always, I thank you for taking the time to listen to this show. You can find me at rgarcia_sports on both Instagram and Twitter. For MMA ratings, you can hit us up at MMAratingsnet and .com for all of our written content there. You can find this podcast on YouTube at MMA Ratings, both this podcast and the MMA Ratings podcast, which I do with Schwan Humes later on in the week. And you can also catch this show across multiple streaming platforms, including Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breaker as well. Please be sure to subscribe in all those spaces. You can check us out on Instagram and Twitter at MMA Ratingsnet in both spaces. So as always, again, thank you for listening to this show. Enjoy the rest of your week. Please be safe out there. Get vaccinated. Wear your mask if you decide not to, and socially distance. We need to get out of this situation. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.